The rain fell like a curtain between heaven and earth, blurring the lonely highway into a silver river of sorrow. Headlights cut through the storm, engines roared past without slowing, and on the side of that endless road stood a trembling German shepherd with ribs showing through matted fur and desperation burning in her amber eyes. In one heartbeat, she made a choice that would change 4 lives forever. She ran straight into the path of a man who had seen war, loss, and darkness, and leapt into his arms as if they were the last safe place left in the world. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that even in the darkest storms, love still finds a way. Chief Petty Officer Daniel Hayes had survived battlefields overseas, but nothing had prepared him for the battlefield of coming home. A decorated Navy SEAL, Daniel carried medals in a drawer and ghosts in his chest. The war had taken friends, fractured his sleep, and left him wandering quiet streets at night when memories grew too loud to ignore. He had returned to his hometown in Washington state hoping the tall pine forests and endless roads would quiet the noise in his mind. Instead, silence often amplified it. On that rain-soaked evening, Daniel was driving back from a late shift at the local training facility where he now worked as an instructor. His truck's wipers struggled against the downpour. The road cut through a dense stretch of forest, miles from the nearest town. That was when he saw her, a blur of tan and black darting between headlights. He slammed the brakes. Tires screamed against wet asphalt. The truck skidded sideways before stopping inches from the trembling dog. For a split second, time froze. Then she did something that stunned him. Instead of running away, the German shepherd ran toward him. Daniel stepped out into the rain, boots splashing in puddles. The dog didn't hesitate. She jumped, her muddy paws landing against his chest, claws gripping his jacket as if she feared he might disappear. She pressed her head against his shoulder and began to shake, not from cold alone, but from terror. And then he felt it. A tiny movement. A faint whimper. He looked down and saw a small puppy clutched gently in her mouth, its eyes barely open, its body frail. The mother's gaze locked onto Daniel's face, pleading in a way no human words could capture. She lowered the puppy carefully into his hands and nudged his arm with her nose, then turned and ran toward the forest's edge. After a few steps, she stopped and looked back. She wanted him to follow. Every instinct trained into Daniel told him to assess the risk. It could be a trap. An injured animal could lash out. The woods were dark and visibility was low. But something deeper than instinct stirred inside him, something he thought he had buried overseas. Compassion. Purpose. A reason to move forward instead of backward. He wrapped the tiny puppy inside his jacket and followed her into the forest. The ground was uneven and slick with mud. Rain dripped from pine needles overhead. The shepherd moved ahead but never too far, constantly checking to make sure he was still there. After about 50 yards, she stopped near a fallen tree. Beneath its roots was a shallow hollow lined with wet leaves. Inside were 2 more puppies. They were so small they looked like fragile shadows curled together. One barely lifted its head when Daniel knelt down. The other whimpered weakly. The shepherd circled anxiously, then returned to Daniel's side. She pressed her forehead against his knee and looked up at him again. It was the same look he had seen in the eyes of civilians during rescue missions overseas, the silent plea that said, "Please don't leave us behind." Daniel swallowed hard. His throat tightened in a way it hadn't in years. He removed his jacket and laid it on the ground, carefully gathering the puppies into its warmth. The mother watched every movement, tense but trusting. When he stood up with the makeshift bundle in his arms, she didn't hesitate. She walked beside him back toward the road, her body brushing against his leg as if afraid he might vanish. The drive home felt different from any drive Daniel had taken since returning from deployment. Instead of replaying explosions and gunfire in his mind, he focused on the faint breathing of the puppies in his passenger seat and the steady presence of the shepherd curled protectively around them. At home, Daniel transformed his quiet cabin into an emergency shelter. Towels were spread across the living room floor. The fireplace roared to life. He called a 24-hour veterinary clinic and explained the situation, his voice steady but urgent. The veterinarian confirmed what Daniel feared. The puppies were malnourished and dehydrated. The mother had recently given birth and had likely been abandoned. There was no microchip. No collar. No sign anyone was looking for them. Over the next few days, Daniel barely slept, but this time, it wasn't nightmares keeping him awake. It was bottle feedings every 2 hours. It was monitoring breathing and temperature. It was sitting beside the mother dog, who he had started calling Hope, as she cautiously accepted food from his hand. Hope never left the puppy's side unless Daniel was there. If he stepped away, she followed. If he sat down, she rested her head on his knee. It was as if she had chosen him, not just as a rescuer, but as family. Caring for them changed Daniel in ways therapy sessions never had. Each small improvement, a puppy opening its eyes, a tiny tail wag, Hope's first playful bark, felt like a victory. The cabin that once echoed with loneliness now pulsed with life. But challenges came quickly. One of the puppies, the smallest of the three, began struggling to breathe. Daniel rushed them to the vet in the middle of the night, rain once again pounding against the windshield like that first evening. The vet warned him that survival wasn't guaranteed. The puppy's lungs were underdeveloped. Infection had set in. Daniel sat on the clinic floor beside Hope, who refused to leave the examination room. He placed his hand gently on her back, feeling her rapid heartbeat beneath damp fur. For the first time since returning from war, he prayed, not for himself, not for peace of mind, but for a tiny life smaller than his palm. The puppy survived the night. Recovery was slow, but steady. Daniel adjusted his work schedule, bringing training materials home so he could stay close. His commanding presence, once reserved for elite missions, softened into quiet patience. Neighbors began to notice the shepherd walking beside him each morning, her posture growing stronger, her eyes brighter. Word spread through the small town about the Navy SEAL and the abandoned dog. Donations of food, blankets, and toys appeared on his porch. Children from nearby houses left handmade cards that read, "Thank you for saving them." Daniel hadn't realized how much he needed saving too. Months passed. The puppies grew into healthy, energetic bundles of chaos. The smallest one, who had nearly slipped away, became the most adventurous, constantly climbing onto Daniel's boots and tugging at his shoelaces. Hope transformed from a skeletal stray into a majestic, strong German shepherd with a glossy coat and unwavering loyalty. But as the puppies approached adoption age, Daniel faced a new battle inside himself. He had planned to find loving homes for them. That was the responsible choice. Yet the thought of the cabin returning to silence filled him with a familiar dread. He had lost enough in his life. Could he bear another goodbye? He began screening potential adopters carefully. He asked about fenced yards, daily routines, commitment. He turned away anyone who seemed uncertain. Not out of control, but out of love. One evening, as he watched the three puppies tumble across the living room floor while Hope supervised proudly, something became clear. He wasn't meant to save them just to let them go entirely. Two of the puppies were adopted by families within town, people Daniel had come to trust over months of visits and conversations. The smallest one, the fighter, never left. Daniel named him Valor. Hope and Valor became permanent fixtures in Daniel's life. They accompanied him on morning runs through the forest. They sat beside him on the porch at sunset. They grounded him during flashbacks, nudging his hand or resting their weight against his leg until the storm inside his mind passed. Through them, Daniel rediscovered purpose. He began volunteering at animal shelters, helping rehabilitate other abandoned dogs. He partnered with veteran support groups, introducing trained rescue dogs to former service members struggling with PTSD. He spoke openly about his own struggles, something he had once considered impossible. Hope, the abandoned shepherd who had leapt into his arms on a rain-soaked highway, became a symbol in their community. Not of tragedy, but of resilience. On the one-year anniversary of that stormy night, Daniel returned to the same stretch of road with hope and valor. The rain had cleared. Sunlight filtered through the trees, illuminating the forest in gold. He stood at the edge of the pavement, remembering the moment she chose him. He knelt down and wrapped his arms around Hope's neck, pressing his forehead gently against hers. Valor bounced around them, barking happily at butterflies. Daniel understood something now that he hadn't before. Saving them hadn't been an act of heroism. It had been an exchange. They had given him back the parts of himself he thought were lost forever. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps more stories of hope and kindness reach the world. And before we close, leave a comment with the word hope if you believe that even the most broken souls, human or animal, deserve love. Because sometimes, the bravest leap isn't made on a battlefield. Sometimes, it's made by a trembling mother dog on a lonely road, carrying her last bit of faith in her mouth, trusting that somewhere in the storm, there is still someone who will not walk away. And sometimes, the one who rescues is the one who needed rescuing all along.